Tonight, devout Catholics make the pilgrimage to pay their respects. St. Peter's Square overflows with admiration.
He's no longer a friend on earth, he's a friend in heaven.
The leaders set to attend the Pope's funeral. Plus, breaking down the price of promises.
Every dollar of new spending in our platform.
As advance voting numbers shatter all records. They won Canada Hockey Gold, now they stand accused of a heinous crime.
It's always difficult for the Crown to prove these cases.
A heart-pounding close call for a grandmother and her grandkids.
The manhole at the next corner blew up, too.
And a stunning story of twins' survival done in stereo.
And he goes, run, he's got a gun.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Todd Vanderhayden.
Good evening. Devout Catholics are starting to gather in Rome ahead of Saturday's funeral for Pope Francis. World leaders like Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine have all said they will attend. And as CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin reports, today we saw the cardinals begin to map out the next steps for the church.
A glimpse of the People's Pope Francis lying in state here in the chapel at Casa Santa Marta, where he lived simply and passed away. Vatican employees and those closest to the pontiff were first to pay tribute. Among them, Vatican analyst Gerard O'Connell.
After more than 20 years, knowing him as a friend, to know now he's no longer a friend on earth, he's a friend in heaven.
The Vatican has released some of the details of the Pope's final hours. He rested in the afternoon, had an early dinner. He thanked his health assistant for granting him his wish to ride through St. Peter's Square. And then, in the early morning hours Monday, he suddenly passed away. Hundreds of thousands are expected to pay their respects in accordance with the age-old rituals and traditions of the Catholic Church. In the crowd today, a group from Canada, from the Holy Spirit Parish in Stittsville, Ontario.
The world lost quite a guy. I mean, he was, always for the poor.
They had planned to be here for the church's Jubilee celebrations, but are now focusing their pilgrimage on the Pope.
We hope to be here tomorrow, line up early and be able to pay our respects to someone we admired and loved.
Cardinals from around the globe have been called to Rome and held a first meeting to lay out the timeline for the ceremonies. The Pope's body will be moved to St. Peter's Basilica for the public viewing that will last 3 days. The funeral will be held Saturday.
He simplified the ceremony to say, let's make it like any ordinary Christian.
A procession will then take the Pope's body to St. Mary Major for burial in a simple wooden coffin in accordance with the Pope's final wishes, near an icon of the Virgin Mary he admired in a basilica where he often prayed. Many expect lineups to start early for the public viewing as mourners from around the world gather at St. Peter's Square to pay their respects. Todd.
CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin at the Vatican for us. Thanks, Jen. Well, in many ways, Francis was a groundbreaking pope. He was determined to reshape and refocus the Catholic Church. CTV's Scott Lightfoot attended a special mass today at St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto.
Inside St. Michael's Cathedral this afternoon.
It is a day of mourning, a day of sadness. But in the Easter octave and in this holy year, it is a day of hope and day also of thanksgiving to God.
Prayers of remembrance for the late pontiff. Hundreds gathered for a midday mass for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis.
I think he'll be remembered as a great man, a man of courage. He stood up to a lot of people in the church who probably weren't happy about everything he was doing. And I think he took chances and he stood up for those who were greatly in need. And I think that's really important.
For millions, Francis was the father of their faith.
I can attest to a great man. He had a great attentiveness to the person in front of him.
But for the Archbishop of Toronto, he was also a cherished supporter. Frank, Cardinal Leo last spoke to Pope Francis in December, when the Pope elevated Leo to the position of cardinal.
He always was very much concerned of what was happening in Canada. He was concerned, and he knew the issues, and we were able to speak frankly, and he asked questions. Truly caring person.
Now Leo, as well as Toronto's Archbishop Emeritus, will head for Rome, first to participate in the funeral for Pope Francis, and then to gather with fellow cardinals to begin the solemn process of choosing the Pope's replacement.
Scott Lightfoot, CTV News.
Less than 1 week to go now until the federal election, and new numbers confirm a record turnout. Elections Canada saying 7.3 million people voted between Friday and Monday in those advance polls. Now that is a 25% increase over the last election. Comes as the Conservatives releasing their official costed platform today with both new spending and some major tax cuts. CTV's Abigail Beeman has more on the party's plan to win votes in this final stretch.
Who's voting for a change?
Change, the Conservative Party's platform name and its leaders' rallying cry.
Less bureaucracy, less consultants, less foreign aid, less money wasted so that inflation comes down.
Conservatives are promising $35 billion in new spending over 4 years, a big chunk on defense. Their tax cuts are now costed, adding up to $75 billion. The major party plank of lowering the lowest tax bracket will be phased in, hitting 12.75% by the 2028 tax year and costing $30 billion over 4 years. By then, Conservatives are promising to reduce the deficit to $14 billion.
The Conservatives says they were going to balance the budget as soon as possible. Well, that's a subjective term, possible, but they're not even close to balancing it by 2028. And again, if you add in the tariff effect, they're way off.
Conservatives are banking on $20 billion in tariffs from Canada's response to the trade war, making up a big portion of revenue. Spending reductions and cuts to get there total $56 billion through things like civil service attrition and cutting consultants and foreign aid.
These numbers are a joke. We aren't in a joke. We are in the worst crisis of our lives. It takes a serious government. It takes a serious plan.
The Liberal leader accuses the Conservatives of relying on phantom growth in the economy that boosts the numbers, while the NDP warn of future cuts.
On the eve of an election, they tell you that, they're going to keep it. Canadians know better. They know that that's not true.
While many of the promises in Poilievre's platform were previously announced, there are a few new ones, including a commitment to no new or higher federal taxes without holding a referendum first. Abigail Beeman, CTV News, Vaughan, Ontario.
Our chief political correspondent Vashi Capellos joining me now from Ottawa. And Vashi, the Conservatives releasing their platform late in the game. They've got a lot on the line here. What are your takeaways?
The big takeaway for me is no projection of a balanced budget, which runs counter to so much of the rhetoric that the Conservatives employed around fiscal management during the Trudeau years. So that stood out. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives don't take into account either, Todd, the possible negative impact of a trade war with the United States, which is considerable and would considerably add to the size of the deficit. And finally, the revenue calculations based on the economic growth that they foresee happening. I don't really know how you arrive at specific numbers about stuff that hasn't happened yet, and it's a big part of what they're banking on in order to achieve their fiscal objectives.
I know the latest Nanos polling continues to show the Liberals are ahead of the Conservatives, Vashi, by let's say 5 to 6 points in this final week, and then we've got this huge surge in advance voting. 7.3 million Canadians over 4 days over the Easter long weekend. What does that say, do you think?
Well, first of all, yay. I'm glad people are voting. That's a wonderful thing to hear as a political journalist. I think it does reflect the level of engagement among the electorate and the idea that they are so divided between two options, that there are two viable options for government and they have coalesced around those two. So I think to a degree that is what is reflected in those numbers, but you never know. It could also be something to do with the fact that they had the time, they weren't working, and they wanted to get ahead of the game ahead of next Monday. Todd.
Well said. Our chief political correspondent, Vashi Capellos in Ottawa. Meantime, Liberal leader Mark Carney back in the province of Quebec today with a blitz in ridings held by the Bloc Québécois. It comes as the NDP is in Alberta trying to hold on to seats in Edmonton amid some growing worries about the party's results next Monday. We have coverage from both campaigns, starting with CTV's Mike Lecouture in Quebec City. Mike.
Todd, the Liberals are trying to rally support in Quebec and believe they can beat the Bloc Québécois in a number of ridings across this province. Mark Carney started his day by having breakfast with Quebec City Mayor Bruno Marchand and a photo op with candidates from the provincial capital region. He also went to a popular poutine place in Granby, Quebec. Now, most of the events today were in Bloc Québécois held ridings. One campaign source tells CTV News the Liberals believe they can take 40 seats in this province. The last time the Liberals won that many seats here, it was under Justin Trudeau in 2015. Carney also toured a manufacturing plant in Trois-Rivières where he says that place will be hit by U.S. tariffs. The Liberal pitch in Quebec is that only the Liberals can stand up to President Donald Trump, and Carney is asking for a strong mandate and more MPs from this province. Carney says with Trump threatening supply management and language laws, he believes the calculation for Quebecers should be simple.
We would always protect Canadian culture, Quebec culture, and we are clear from that. But it's the person at the table who will make those determinations and decisions.
With less than a week to go until the election and the Liberals still leading in the polls, expect Carney to crisscross this country hitting ridings they think they can take from other parties.
I'm Rachel Aiello in Edmonton. Today, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh faced repeated questions about a new pitch he's making to Canadians, telling voters to vote NDP to hold the line against a Liberal supermajority. After spending days downplaying that New Democrats could be about to lose their leverage in Parliament, last night, Singh all but said that's what the party is facing.
Whether Mark Carney gets a supermajority or whether there are enough New Democrats in Parliament to hold the line.
This after an ex-MP gave the crowd a history lesson about the last time the NDP lost official party status.
1993. What happened? We were not there to fight back.
Singh was pressed today on what message that sends.
Is that where your campaign is at right now, that you are facing down potentially losing official party status?
We want Canadians to know what's at stake. And so we want Canadians to know who's really going to hold the line for you.
Polling shows it's the Liberals' lead that seems to be holding, though that could play to Singh's favor in the final few days, if progressive voters feel they can safely cast a ballot for the NDP. Still, some supporters are wondering what comes next.
We might lose some seats. I don't think we're going to quite lose party status.
I think the party is going to need to take an internal look at itself anyway.
Tonight, Singh touched down in Alberta, where the party is hoping to hold on to the 2 seats it has while trying to pick up a third from the Liberals. Asked today if he'd consider resigning if the party fails to hold on to the 12 seats needed to maintain party status, Singh said he's not looking that far ahead. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Edmonton.
And tomorrow night, the CTV National News with Omar Sachedina will be live from Victoria in Battleground, BC. There are a lot of interesting three-way races in that province. That is Wednesday night at 11 p.m. Some dramatic video to show you now of a narrow escape for a family living in upstate New York. A woman with a stroller walking down this sidewalk with her 2 grandkids after an Easter egg hunt when suddenly the manhole blows up, sending debris concrete flying into the air and just missing the 3 of them.
I couldn't really run straight ahead of me to the corner because the manhole at the next corner blew up too.
At least 3 separate manholes exploded in the area. The cause is under investigation, but high levels of carbon monoxide were detected in that part of the city. All right, coming up, picking a jury for 5 former NHL players who stand accused of sexual assault.
You know very little about the potential jurors. You know occupation, you know age, you know general area that they live in.
Who'll be on the jury in a trial that's rocked the hockey world? To a high-profile hockey case playing out today in London, Ontario, the jury has been officially chosen. 5 former members of Canada's 2018 World Junior team, all facing sexual charges. They showed up in court together for the first time. Our coverage begins with CTV's Adrian Gobriel on day 1 and how the trial could play out.
From teammates to champions to accused sexual predators. One by one, 5 players from the 2018 gold medal winning World Junior hockey team arrived at this London, Ontario courthouse for the first day of trial. Their case has already been unprecedented on multiple levels. Former Team Canada captain Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, and Alex Fermenton have each been charged with sexual assault. McLeod is also facing one charge of being party to the offense. Inside the courtroom, a row of 5 separate tables for each of the accused line one side of the room. Each stood before the court on this day to plead not guilty. Justice Maria Caracia then spent the day selecting 14 jurors, 11 women and 3 men, who will decide the fate of the accused.
You know very little about the potential jurors. You know occupation, you know age, you know general area that they live in, but you don't know very much about them.
One person who will have their identity and credibility called into question by the defense is the alleged victim, who's expected to be called to the stand as early as this Friday.
This is a case that will come down to the evidence primarily of the complainant and her credibility.
The alleged group sexual assault took place inside this London, Ontario hotel in June 2018 following a Hockey Canada gala. A lawsuit filed in April of 2022 states that an alleged female victim met a group of young men at a bar following the gala and had consensual sex with one of the players. She alleges that afterwards, 7 others entered the hotel room and, quote, directed, manipulated, and intimidated her into remaining in the room where she says she was sexually assaulted.
It's always difficult for the Crown to prove these cases because at the end of the day, it is proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's expected that multiple players from that World Junior team who weren't charged will be called to the stand, some of whom are currently playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Tomorrow, the Crown will begin their opening arguments, and they'll be calling their first witness of this trial. Todd?
All right, thanks very much, Adrian. For more, I spoke earlier with Rick Westhead, who is a senior correspondent for TSN, also a contributor for us here at CTV News. He has been covering this story right from the beginning. Rick, you were inside the courtroom. How was the jury selected, and what can you tell us about the group?
Well, it was an interesting day. You know, we started out with some procedural events, and at one point the Crown Attorney in this case read out a list of prospective witnesses who could be called, a list of witnesses that included many of the members of the 2018 World Juniors team, players who are still playing in the National Hockey League in the playoffs. You know, Cale Makar was maybe the highest profile name that was mentioned. And then the jury selection began. And about 200 prospective jurors were taken into a room, an empty courtroom, and one by one they were brought into the main courtroom, and they were asked by the judge questions to try to determine whether they had a preconceived bias that would exclude them from being able to make an impartial decision on this. They were asked questions like whether they had a perspective on hockey players, the behavior of hockey players, whether they themselves or whether anyone they knew had previously been either accused of sexual assault or a victim of sexual assault. And in the end, the jury was decided on, and in an interesting composition, 11 women and 3 men will make up the jury in this case. That's 14 jurors. So if by the end of the case all 14 jurors remain and no one has had to leave because of, you know, a family emergency or an illness, there will be a random draw where 2 jurors would be excluded and 12 jurors would then decide a verdict in the case.
And what comes next here, Rick, in this case? I know you've been following it very closely.
Yeah, well, we're back in court tomorrow morning at 9:30, and we will hear the government, the Crown prosecutor, detail the government's case against these 5 co-defendants, and after that, we'll get right into testimony. So later this week, we'll probably be hearing testimony from EM, the complainant in the case, the person who went to police and whose identity is protected under this publication ban.
All right, thanks very much, Rick. Still ahead for us, the changing landscape of oil and gas in Canada. What Alberta's energy sector is hoping for in this federal election. Welcome back. Over the past few weeks, as politicians crisscross the country trying to win your vote, we have been sending reporters out to get a pulse on the most crucial issues for Canadians. Tonight, Fort McMurray, a bustling hub in northern Alberta, known, of course, for its rich oil sands. CTV's Kathy Lee is there for us.
In the heart of the Athabasca oil sands is Fort McMurray. The bitumen from the ground is an economic driver for the community of 70,000. And many businesses like this one are linked to the oil and gas sector.
This will go to some tailings pond or a ditch to pump the water out.
In this shop, most have worked in the industry for decades, including operations manager Jeff Walsh.
There's 169 billion barrels of oil in the ground here.
The latest figures show that nearly all of Canada's crude oil exports go to the United States, almost 90% coming from the oil sands here.
Walsh wants to see Alberta oil go to different markets and hopes the next Prime Minister will make that happen.
We've been in a battle for several years about getting our product to new markets so we can get better price for our oil.
A higher price would help the economy. Fort McMurray has weathered multiple oil boom-bust cycles.
It ain't booming anymore, and people are losing their shirts and their jobs and their homes, and because they can't afford to live here.
Affordability, another issue people here want fixed.
Affordability when it comes to groceries, affordability when it comes to renting or owning a home.
Taking care of homeless people, helping out lower, people that need it.
This community has had its fair share of hardships, including floods and the devastating wildfire 9 years ago.
When I was leaving town, there's fire at the road on each side of the highway. It kind of felt like life and death situation.
No matter how dire the situation, the people of Fort McMurray are resilient, but they're hoping to get some more help from whoever wins the election. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Fort McMurray, Alberta.
Still ahead, in perfect unison, why these twins are in sync for taking the internet by storm. Finally tonight, twin sisters from Australia and their so-called twin speak has gone viral. People just can't get enough. Check this out.
He went up there and he was coming back down towards us and he goes, "Run, he's got a gun." And our heart started to pound and I said, "Oh, Mum, where's Mum?"
The sisters were recounting a scary incident with an alleged armed carjacker. This video racking up almost 6 million views in one day. The sisters are now internet famous, although they are already local celebrities in Australia for their wildlife rescue work. And that is the CTV National News on this Tuesday. I'm Todd Vanderheyden. Omar Sachedina is back tomorrow from Victoria. We leave you tonight with images from the Vatican as the world prepares to say goodbye to Pope Francis.